I see I'm not so lucky already. I was hoping for a bunch of no-shows. Before we start, I have one request, that there's no tears from the audience if you want me to finish with this. And if you break this rule, and I already know who you're going to be, there will be consequences. I made the mistake of giving Leslie a trial run this morning, and it did not go well. I also attended the Dean's School of Controlling One's Emotions, and as we all know, that never works. So here we go. When Fran and Deidre approached me about my faith walk, I was hesitant, but I said sure. I know they thought it would be a godly experience for all of you, not realizing they put the fear of God in me having to give this talk. My first thought was I would not have enough to say, but as I thought more about it, I'm now wondering if I have enough time. So here we go. I'm a descendant of Jewish immigrants from Russia and Austria. My dad's family landed in Chicago and my mom's in New York. You're probably wondering how they got together, as we all know the sports feuds between those two great cities. It just so happened they were both on vacation in Miami when they met. They did the long distance thing and got married in 1958, moving to Chicago where I was born in 1959. We lived in many states over the years and they eventually fulfilled the dream of moving to Florida where they met. Both my parents and their families were very religious. While they wanted the same for me, I was not so much. I missed the Hebrew schooling so many of my friends had, as my dad's sales job moved us to 3 different states in 2 years during that time. I did end up being bar mitzvahed, which is a ceremony of becoming a man at age 13, but it was a 3-month tutoring to learn Hebrew and memorize my Haftorah in the Hebrew Bible, which I believe to be the 5 books of Moses in the Old Testament, but in Hebrew. If I can go back a bit, my dad was a great athlete and had scholarship offers to Notre Dame and Michigan for swimming and football, although I do not know Notre Dame knew he was Jewish. Unfortunately, he was unable to fulfill those dreams as he was drafted into World War II. He was part of the invasion of Normandy, France in 1944, and was shot in the leg 3 times by machine gun fire in the Battle of St. Lo while pulling in a fellow soldier who had just been shot. He ended up in a hospital for over a year, not knowing if he would ever walk again. Fortunately, he overcame these injuries and used his athleticism to become a great golfer. He taught me the game and I became pretty good myself. I ended up playing golf at the University of Florida, which led me to the Maccabiah Games. Does anyone know what these are? Okay. So, it's the Olympic game competition for Jewish athletes from around the world in Israel every 4 years. And it's named, as you probably know, for the Jewish rebel army who fought and took control of Judea. Some of the famous athletes you may know that have participated are 7-time swimming gold medalist Mark Spitz and Corey Pavin, who later went on to win a U.S. Open. So in the summer of 1981 and again in 1989, I was on the USA golf team, going to Israel for 2 wonderful weeks, sharing their heritage, culture, and the history of Israel with other Jews from around the world. And it was truly an amazing experience. When I made the team in 1989, I was a working man living in Atlanta, so playing good enough golf was a bit of a surprise. I had moved on to other things. I had many great friends who I met through the apartment complex softball and tennis co-ed teams. We were a mixture of both Jews and Gentiles, i.e. Christians, who loved and respected each other. This was my first introduction to hearing the other side of the story. On January 10th, 1994, me and a buddy were headed to the local sports bar to watch the NFL playoffs. He was a golf nut like myself and begged me to first stop at the driving range for some practice. Usually that was not a problem, but it was 50 degrees and drizzly. So we go to the range and I watch him hit some balls. Several times I told him, hurry up, come on, we're gonna miss the kickoff. I soon noticed a beautiful young woman a few bays down from us who was struggling a bit with her game. Well, what else was I to do but offer my assistance? In the meantime, my buddy finished hitting his balls, and he hit me with the same line, come on, we're gonna miss the kickoff. My reply, here's $5, go get another bucket. If you haven't figured it out yet, that young woman was my wife, Leslie. So we began to date and learn more about each other. She shared she was very religious. I thought to myself, I can handle that. It was part of the total package. And hey, I needed more religion in my life anyway, so I was in. We were married in September that year and had our son Ian in May of 1998. We then moved to St. Petersburg in 2000 to be close to the family and had our daughter Lucy in September of 2002. We started going to church at First Presbyterian and I became close to Pastor Chuck Jones. He had a fire for God like none I'd ever seen, and he gave some of the most inspiring sermons. A few years later, Chuck moved on to teaching at a local college, and we found ourselves looking for another church. We came to FCC in 2006, and again I was drawn to another pastor, Don Logue, another great one who, as you know, founded this church and was back serving on an interim basis. Well, that interim basis, I recall, lasted over a year, and at that time allowed us to build a great relationship. FCC then hired Rick Carlson, and again I found myself close to another pastor. As many of you remember, Rick was on his own for the first year as his wife Pat continued with her job up north. I had a heavy heart with respect to his being alone, and I always tried to see if he was up for a meal or a movie. He actually was a movie fanatic and loved kids' movies, so that worked out well for our family. After a few years, God opened an opportunity where Rick could utilize his musical gifts and talents, so he was off to New Jersey, and FCC was on the search again. In comes Pastor Dave Johnson and his wonderful wife, Kay. Again, I'm drawn to them big time. I asked myself, what is up with these pastors and me? Who would have thunk it? Can this be explained? All along, I have assisted Leslie as needed with the Sunday schools at FCC. I found myself enjoying the work with the kids, and they seemed to like me as well. As fate would have it, my journey also had me getting involved with the Wednesday and Sunday night youth groups. Once again, another great relationship was built with Chuck Howard and his trusty sidekick, Jill Dean. And finally, Kevin Dean shows up. Will my streak be broken? Nope, another pastor who I hit it off with right from the start. Over the years, there have been many in this church that have prayed for me. I've always looked forward to my Sunday chats with my good friend, Bob Bushman, who passed away last month. We always talked current events, politics, sports, and religion. He always talked about those against the Jews are looking for trouble, and he always encouraged me to get right with Jesus, and he was confident I would come around one of these days. Then there's my dear friends Karen and Tom Vanderploot, who for years Karen has constantly been pushing scripture and blessings my way. Once she took me and my son Ian to meet our hero, Tim Tebow. She even has Tim's mom praying for me. Others I'd like to mention are the Bowmans, especially Tim, who welcomed us into this church. I know that and continues to be a great friend and example. Then there's the Keeners, the Osborns, the Nevers, the Smiths, the Leapers, the Petersons, the Deans, the Bass family, and many others. Everybody's praying I'd also like to include Leslie's spiritual mentors, Sheila and Don Reninger, who I know pray for me every day. Then there's Janice and Mike Mydell, who I really got to know during Pastor Dave Johnson's arrival. I remember one Sunday after church when they stopped me in the parking lot. The sermon must have really hit home with Janice, and she asked me with tears in her eyes, what is holding me back? I've always had many questions when things happen that did not make sense to me logically. I'll save all that for another day. I always felt like if it's so obvious to follow Jesus, why aren't all the millions of Jews doing it? My parents and my closest family members aren't so why should I? Out of respect for them, it's just not easy to join the other team. But that day got me thinking, maybe it's time to dig a little deeper and to just not live life day to day. I saved Leslie's family for last, as I know they prayed for me for day one. They never really pushed me and they gave me my space, and I always appreciated that. If I failed to mention their names today, it would be trouble. So, I'm talking about Leslie's parents, Annette and Jim Jenkins, my sister and brother-in-law, Gigi and Scott Fleming, their daughters, Ramey and Emmy, and my other sister and brother-in-law, Tammy and Rob Renke, and their amazing daughters, Caitlin and Shelby. Then there's Rob's parents, Katie and Clinton. Clinton just passed a week ago. He had a wonderful soul and was a deeply religious man who is now in a better place. Several years ago, Katie gave me a book called Betrayed. Have any of you ever read it or even heard of it? Well, my talk with Janice inspired me to finally pick this book up and read it. It was written by a man named Stan Telchin. Some of you may remember that he actually spoke at our church a few years ago. I knew the story from 60,000 feet, but needed more detail. It's basically about a highly successful businessman who's a big part of his Jewish community, and whose 21-year daughter calls him from college one day and tells her dad that she believes in Jesus. Betrayed is his reaction when he hangs up the phone. He decides he'll set out to prove her wrong about Jesus being the Messiah. It will be easy. Just read the entire Old and New Testaments. Right in the preface of this book is a quote I think about and would like to share. Answers in life are a dime a dozen. Everybody has a better answer. The real problem in life is coming up with the right questions. Searching for answers for the right questions can change your life. So what are the probabilities of the following 8 prophecies concerning the Messiah? The place of the Messiah's birth, his being preceded by a messenger, how he was to enter Jerusalem, his betrayal by a friend, he would be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, the money would be thrown to God's house, he would be mute before his accusers, and he would be crucified. Modern science of probabilities found the chance that any man that lived down the precise time and fulfilled all 8 prophecies is 1 in 10 to the 17th power. To comprehend this number, it would take many silver dollars covering the square footage of the state of Texas, and they would need to be stacked 2 feet high. Now, if one of the silver dollars was marked and the whole mass was stirred up, and then you sent a blind man to find it, there you go. So all the prayers and blessings in this book finally got me ready. I wanted to make a special day even more special, so I chose that Sunday last October to accept Jesus through Pastor Domino on his celebration day. As soon as Dave Johnson found out, he called me to pray with me. I was also honored to light the final Advent candle on Christmas. Maybe not the best idea, as I almost burned down the church. I did not know how that thing worked. And since have added a training request for the FCC suggestion box. Since then, I participated in BSF, another golf connection through my good friend Dr. Rob Anley, who was thrilled to hear my news and who hoped I would take it deeper. I just got back from an incredible trip, being a leader on the student life trip to Palm Beach, Atlantic. I was truly blessed by the event, and I'd like to give some thanks. I personally am thankful for the opportunity I had to build relationships with the kids I did not know or hardly knew, and to grow those relationships with those I did know, while watching them all build relationships with each other. And for Sunday school, which allowed me to see how our kids had matured into young adults. They represented and served FCC well, and we are also proud of them. I'm thankful for my suite mates, Jacob and Seth Arnold and Nate Coster, and for my roommate, and for my roomie, Will Osborne, who I love and who taught me patience.
Yikes.
We are all thankful for the opportunity to touch the lives of other kids who are not as fortunate as us through these missions. Thanks to Pastor Wade for doing such an amazing job with our kids on our trip. He's a good one, and I'm thankful God has brought him to us. And many thanks to Miss Jill, who continues to go on these trips, supporting our kids without missing a step. She showed me the ropes, and I would have not been nearly as effective without her help. And I'm thankful for the incredible band, which brought music and scripture together like I'd never seen before, rock style, which is right up my alley. One thing that stuck with me that I had not heard was being saved. I've always asked, saved from what? I learned it was to be saved from your sins, but this pastor shed a new light on it for me, contrasting saved from versus saved for. Saved for is God saving us for sharing the gospel. Is that news to anybody, or am I the only one that didn't know that? There was one experience we shared that I'll never forget. On Tuesday night, as we were finishing up the pastor's session, a boy came up to the stage. He was Andy, a sixth grader from another church who rocked our world. He asked the pastor to pray for him as he was having chemo this week. Everything so far was scripted. The skits, the songs that were going to be played, the message from the pastor that was going to be preached, but this was real. Everybody lost it, including the pastor, who said in all of his years doing this, a kid never asked to come up on stage. So if you would please pray that Andy's treatment is successful and he is healed, that would be great. So that's my walk, and if I have a calling, it may be just working with the kids. Thanks for listening.